We'd like to say welcome once again to our weekend podcast. This is the Gracious Hope live podcast. Here, my name is Alexander Red of the Gracious Hope Bible Fellowship. And here today is a very fascinating day because we have a special guest who is going to explain 2 decades of services in the arena of government, that is the public square, as well as academia and his faith. And so we got a whole lot that we hear here from the memoir, A Liberian Life of Dr. D. Elwood Dun. And he is our special guest today. And I'm so glad that he will be here to explain his own experience and how Liberian life that he had experienced, both past and present, and his outlook or perspective on the future will be something that will be so fascinating to listen to today. And so he's a man of faith, and he's a household name in Liberian politics as well as in the academic arena. And so we are so glad to have him as our guest today, Dr. D. Elwood Dun. And I'm here first. I will introduce with I'm here with our co-host, Reverend Suah as Deddeh. Reverend Deddeh is so glad to be here once again to begin this podcast. And what a great guest that we have today, Dr. D. Elwood Dun. And he has wealth of knowledge and experience when it comes to the Liberian life as a whole.
Certainly, there's no doubt about that. There's no question about that. When we talk about Liberian renowned historians that we can count on, dependable, one of the names or the foremost name that will come up would be, I almost said Reverend Doctor. I almost call him Reverend Doctor. Yeah, it would be Dr. Elwood Dun, who have selflessly served our country in various capacity with the government, with the governance committee, with Dr. Sawyer, the Ellen government, with the Tolbert government. He has a wealth of experience that he's written in the memoir, and we are happy that it's an honor to have him on this program today, on this broadcast, to discuss his work and his love for country. And I'm glad he's a Christian, born again, which is a blessed thing. This program is geared towards that, talking with people who are Christian, people who love the Lord. And then on top of that, he is an academician. So we are glad to have him today. I'm sure we're gonna learn a lot today. We are with the fountain of knowledge. And so, Alex, I can't wait to start this discussion today.
Yes, and this book was launched on July the 10th, officially, virtually. And as you can see on the screen here, it was launched on the 10th, and it's called, the title is A Liberian Life, Memoir of an Academic and Former Minister of State for Presidential Affairs. And we know Dr. Dunn served in the Tolbert administration as a minister for state for presidential affairs. Yes. And so we are so glad to have him here today. And he has a whole lot to say here regarding his faith, his academic experience, as well as looking at the government as a whole, his functionary and his role in public service And so without much ado, we are so glad to have Dr. Dunn. Dr. Dunn, welcome to our podcast, Gracious Hope Live podcast here. And it is a pleasure to have you here as our special guest today to discuss your new memoir, which of course is the Liberian Life, a memoir of the former president, or let's say former state and presidential affairs minister and an academic. Welcome.
Thank you very much. It is a real joy for me being with you guys um, to talk a little bit about my experience. And much of it has been in Liberia, but a good bit of it has been in the academic community in this country as well.
Yes, yes, and we look at all of your 2 decades of experience, both in the government as well as in the arena of the academic setting, as well as your own faith, and looking at our country in the past, the present, and the future. We will start here with your faith, okay? Your man of faith, and you believe that in all of this, without the strength coming from Christ, you won't be, or you wouldn't do the things that you do, and you are contributed immensely to our country. So let us start here first. Uh, Tell us about how your faith had enabled you to persevere all of these years going through the thick and thin.
Wonderful. Well, when I talk about my fifth, I start with my maternal grandmother. And I started with my maternal grandmother because she introduced me at a very early age to Jesus Christ.
Hmm.
And he has since been the foundation upon which my life has been built. I have grown up with her. She has trained me and prepared me for the, shall I call it, the vicissitudes of life, the ups and downs of life. She basically almost anticipated what was in front of me and basically said to me, "Here's your guide. The Holy Bible is your guide." All of the great precepts of the Bible I learned under her, and I took out of that home in Lower Buchanan, Grand Bassa County, to Bassa High School, to the University of Liberia, to Cuttington College, to studies in France and studies in the United States. All of that has been my guide and my stay all along.
Hmm.
Yes, yes, Reverend Deddeh. The Bible is always the guide, and God gives us the Bible not just like a mere manual, but a book of life, a book with a roadmap to lead you with wisdom and the certainty that if you depend on God and His Word and His promise, yes, you will persevere. And I know Dr. Dunn has persevered all through his life. He's been through the challenges, the pitfalls, and he has seen a lot. Now, Reverend Deddeh, I just want to pose this question just before you come in here. Dr. Dunn, looking at Liberia from your growing up to the time you excelled to the position of becoming a minister of state and presidential affairs, how was it like when it comes to the inner workings of government compared to then and now, and your experience from that time? Or at
Well,
that time.
yes, it was an interesting experience. I completed my graduate studies in this country. I worked for 4 years at Seton Hall University in New Jersey, teaching. And then I went back home because I felt I was needed back home. I joined the government of Liberia at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs as an assistant minister of foreign affairs and as head or director of the Foreign Service Institute, training young people for service, for foreign service. So I worked in that capacity for 3 years. The Minister of Foreign Affairs was the late Cecil Dennis at the time. I worked very closely with him. And then after 3 years, I was invited to join the executive mansion as a deputy minister for presidential affairs, and then subsequently as minister of foreign affairs. It was an interesting time in Liberia. Those who are old enough to remember the 70s will remember, because we are talking about the 1970s. I arrived home in 1974, to be precise. Interesting times in the sense that Liberia was in the, how shall I put it? Liberia was in the process of coming to terms with its past and trying to determine what the path forward should be. And when I say that, I'm talking about the fact that there was a government in place led by President Tolbert, a government very open to the idea of change, to the idea of addressing some of the problems in Liberia's past. And then you had on the stage a number of social movements called MOJA, the Movement for Justice in Africa, and social movement called PAL, the Progressive Alliance of Liberia, and all of these, and a number of other groups challenging the government for change. So that we want change, and we want change now. We don't want any delays. And what I sensed there, if I may just put it in summary form, was the forces for change confronted the forces of the status quo. Change versus the status quo. It was the business of the government of Liberia under Tolbert to address that critical situation. Where do you move? Do you move with the forces of change? Do you stay with the forces of the status quo? Do you try to find a middle course? I think the president was probably found himself in a situation where he needed to, where he sought to find a middle course. And it was a very difficult position under those circumstances.
So in other words, the president found himself in a dilemma between these two forces. You think that led to the coup in 1980?
Well, obviously, part of what happened in the 70s led to the coup of 1980. But I think it's important to point out that the president was very open to the forces for change. His problem was that he had some colleagues of long duration, I should say. Remember that he was vice president of Liberia for almost 20 years before he succeeded President Tubman to the presidency. So he was part of that old regime, if you will, and had colleagues of that old regime still in place. The speaker, the chief justice, a number of other people. And they were not so keen on change. And yet he had to try to find a way of basically saying, ladies and gentlemen, the time has come for us to move forward. So on the left, he was being pulled, and on the right, he was being pulled. Yes, and he experienced some difficulty in trying to determine exactly what to do in that kind of a situation.
So we will characterize that situation that he was facing emotionally and psychologically as his inaction or debating between where to turn caused some delay, and those social groups or pressure groups, they were very fired up for a change. So do you think that because of his inaction caused those pressure group to yank up their pressure, and because the delay in between there might have led to his demise of that government?
Well, I don't think the word inaction is apropos, because he was very active. You will see in the book that I go into some detail in pointing out the series of meetings, series of dialogues he was engaged in with individuals from these groups and sympathizers from these groups. The Christian ministry, people in the Christian ministry, people such as the late Bishop Michael Francis, Bishop George Brown. All of these people were very active. The then pastor of the Providence Baptist Church, Reverend Itomo Reeves. All of these people were also very supportive of the idea of change, and he sought to dialogue with all of these people. He considered the change advocates as legitimate in the context of the political process in Liberia. So it was not that he was sitting there. It was that I think someone put it another way, and that was that he was not a political operative,
Hmm.
meaning how to maneuver the situation in such a way that you end up achieving your purpose. He was not fully able to achieve his purpose. Those who will in the future take the time to look at the details of the policies that he sought to put in place, whether it was health or agriculture or education, you go the whole area, you will see what he was endeavoring to put in place was in the interest of the country.
Great, great, great. You talk about some of the discussions he had. I'm sure because he called the youth his precious jewels. I mean, he loved the young people, and he wanted to see progressives making headways in the country. But were you privy to some of these meetings that he had with these different groups you mentioned, and at the time?
Well, some of them surely. Those that I didn't sit in on, I acquired the minutes of those meetings, and that's what I used to do my book. But I was part of a group. I was, for example, part of a group that he established to look into the True Whig Party, the ruling party at the time.
Hmm.
He brought in people from many walks of life and said to them basically, you go and study this party and come up with recommendations. Mr. Emmanuel Shaw was the chairperson of that group. Uh, those who know him, one would have to make some explanation because his orientation was a little different from what it was then compared to what it subsequently became. I think that point needs to be made. But I remember a line in that report said that we are going to hold a convention in Buchanan to look into the report, to consider the report. And the report is basically saying, if you do not take seriously our recommendations for fundamental transformational change in this party, this convention that we are going to in Buchanan could very well then be the last convention of the True Whig Party. This was in, I believe, December, not December, probably like October, November of 1979.
Hmm.
You know what happened when we got to this October, November 1980. The party wasn't there, the government wasn't there. That is, the government did not heed the warnings. And again, this happened because the forces of change were battling with the forces of the status quo.
Wow.
Okay. So that battle that was going on at the time, will you say if the progressives, or let's say those pressure groups that want to change and yanking up the pressure, do you think that if they had been patient enough, change was going to come? And if so, do you think this whole thing about the violence that took place, which of course is the coup d'état that took place, was first of all wrong in the first place, was wrong?
I don't believe that the only way to change Liberia was through violence. In other words, I believe that a peaceful change was possible. And obviously, if we had taken that route, Liberia would be, I believe, in a better place today as a consequence. But of course, history moves in ways that we sometimes cannot control. And the coup came about. Now, why do I say what I said? I say what I said because I worked very closely with Mr. Tolbert. And I understood very well that he was putting in place policies that he would leave behind that were in the interest of Liberia. And I believe that had he reached the end of his term, which was to be 1983, I believe, he had an 8-year term. I think that started about 1975. He would have left the presidency by constitutional mandate. He was required, but knowing him, the human person that I knew, he would have left the presidency. And once he left, I think the field would have been wide open. I personally hold the view that it's even possible that the True Whig Party could have been defeated in an open, free, and fair election in 1983. And we would have then made a very smooth transition from a de facto one party regime to a multi party democracy developing, going forward. I think that possibility was there. But it didn't happen that way for all kinds of reasons that are both internal and, I should underscore, external as well. And all of the details of those things have yet to be researched and written. Some of the reasons for this has to do with the fact that some of the information is classified, some of the information is destroyed. It's all over the place. So down the future, this is in the hands of you young people now, and those that come after you, to go and dig up, because people without knowledge of his history is a people that would have difficulty determining where they are going. It's important to know where you're coming from, to know where you are going. So it's important for all of that history that is buried so far to be unearthed, so that one can understand more fully what transpired and why the change was violent, as opposed to the possibility of a peaceful change that was also in the cards.
Yes,
Well,
and you give a
it's,
unique perspective in your new book here, and I hope you can watching us, you can get this book, this memoir at what was that web page? You can also get it on, was it Blaze?
It is Brill, Brill, Brill.com. That's the publisher.
Yeah,
Brill.com.
brill.com. Yes, you
Yes,
can get a BRILL.com.
dot com. That's it.
Okay, you can get a copy there. Is it on Amazon as well?
I believe it is. I believe it is
Okay,
as well.
okay.
Yeah.
So you can get
And
a copy, and this memoir is very fascinating because you get to see Dr. Dunn's perspective on what it means to work at the executive mansion and be close to a president, William R. Tolbert Jr., including his associates. He worked from 1971 to April 1980. And he saw a whole lot, and as he is also sharing his perspective here, we all can reflect and see his insight on some of the things that were going on. Now, he mentions about the internal and external forces. Now, the pressure group, put aside the pressure group, do you think, when it comes to external forces, do you think that the pressure group had connection with external forces, or those who took over the soldiers, PRC, were they linked to outside forces other than the social pressure groups?
well, that's part of what I meant when I said the research has yet to be done,
Okay.
and the reasons why it's difficult to go forward with this research. I have endeavored to dig into some of this information, but all I have come up with so far amounts to circumstantial evidence. I have not found the smoking gun, and that is what I'm saying. It remains in the hands of the younger generation to go find that smoking gun, if there is one. I don't know if there's one. So some of us suspect that there may be one, but we have not found it, and therefore the challenge remains to try and find out exactly what transpired. The issue was both domestic and external, as I said earlier on. And there's the human tendency to sometimes say, well, the external is irrelevant. We must just focus on the domestic. And I'm saying it's both. It's not one or the other, it's both. And you must put both together to appreciate what goes on. And yes, there were some connections. I noticed you made this point in your questioning. There were some connections between some of the social movements and some external forces. External forces had an interest in what was transpiring in Liberia, and to the extent that they could make common cause, if I may put it that way, with some of the internal players, they proceeded to do that.
I'm going back to the book on page 20 here. I see an interesting phrase here. When you relocated to Monrovia, you said that Monrovia for you was a new word. What did you mean by that?
Well, I had been born and raised in Grand Paso in Lower Buchanan, and I had come very seldom to Monrovia. I had not known Monrovia and the whole social setting, if you will, of Monrovia. So I was, in a way, lost, not knowing where to go or what to do. But I found my way when I began going to my church, Trinity Cathedral, Trinity Pro Cathedral at the time, and discovered there the late Father Seth C. Edwards and the Reverend Canon Burgess Carr, and then found my way to the YMCA. And Mr. David Howard was the Secretary General of the YMCA, and Yancey Peters Flower was his assistant. And then there was something called the National Student Christian Council of Liberia, and I found my way there too. And these were the institutions that helped me find my way through Monrovia. They had helped me navigate my way, if you will, through Monrovia. And there's something very important that came out of all of that. And that very important thing was that I then, through those institutions, I was given the opportunity to leave Liberia and travel to East Africa for the very first time in my life. It was my first time leaving Liberia. I attended in 1962 in Nairobi, Kenya, the All Africa Christian Youth Assembly.
Hmm.
And that was an eye opener for me. It opened me to the rest of the African world and all of what came with all of that. That was
Wow,
a tremendous experience for me.
that's great. That's good. Alex?
Yes, yes, yeah, tremendous experience looking at Monrovia at the time, where there was a peaceful setting, educational system running, everything running efficiently when it comes to basic needs, basic necessities like electricity, water, all of those things, amenities that Liberians were enjoying at the time. Now, if you were to take a look at from the 80s after the People Redemption Council took over, and later on we witnessed the entire PRC destroyed, and then the constitution was changed or was revised, and looking at a new president that came to put power at the time, Samuel Doe. How will you characterize, if you were to explain to a younger generation today, if they were to listen to you, how will you characterize all of those incidents that took place? I would call them turbulence. Okay, Liberia was in a turbulent state after Toba was um, taken away. Okay,
Mm.
how will you characterize all of those years leading to our modern time? And we'll get to your service in the Ellen Johnson Sirleaf government. But how will you characterize all of those incidents that took place getting to the revised constitution and a new government from the military coup, planters or plotters?
Well, listen, the first thing I will say is this. For me, the point of departure is what happened in the decade of the 70s. The decade of the 70s suggested that Liberia needed to pause and to reconsider a lot. And I think this happened in the 70s. And I think the blueprint for Liberia going forward was somehow there in the 70s as well. It may sound a little strange to some people, but the point I'm trying to make here is all of the things that suggested that we needed to move forward and move forward deliberately were happening in the 1970s, including, for example, um, proposals for constitutional change. People were beginning to talk about those. There was a national commission that was set up to look at the Constitution, to look at national symbols and those kinds of things in the 70s. And so some of us felt when the coup took place and the dust had settled, when the ugliness of the executions and all of that had happened, some of us thought that given the role of the civilians who were part of the PRC government, that they would guide this military government in the path forward to pick up some of those unrealized things of the 70s that I was just talking about and move forward with it. But there was, I think, an unwillingness on the part of some, probably particularly President Doe, to do this. And what I mean by that, when I say unwillingness, what happens? We first see that a new constitution committee is established. Dr. Suah is made the chairperson of that committee. A draft is concluded, and that draft constitution is a good document, I think. But what happens? Doe is unhappy because I think the draft precluded him from running for office, given his age at the time and other considerations, I'm sure. So he takes that draft and he gives it to, I think, a 59-person commission headed by the late Dr. Kessley, Edward Kessley. Send them to Banga and says to them, do with it what you wish, but come back with something that I can digest, that I can accept. They come back with something. What is that something? That something, for example, addresses the issues, many issues, but one of them they address is term limits. The presidential term moves from 4 under the Suah draft, goes to 6 under the Kessley revision. The legislators go from 4 to 6. The Senate goes from 6 to 9. We are laboring under all of that as we speak. This is what is happening with that constitutional change. Then you had the other element, and that other element was infighting among the PRC members themselves.
Mm-hmm.
You know what happened in 1985 when Kouampa showed up. And from that, that leads us to 1989, Christmas Eve, 1989, and a terrible civil war that follows. Okay? Then we overcame all of that. And then the challenge under the new regime of Ellen Johnson Sirleaf was now to clean up all of that mess and try to put Liberia on a forward-moving path. That would be the story of the Sirleaf regime and the extent to which she was successful in making some headway.
And that brings us to your work with the good governance with Dr. Suah. And I think you work very hard to couch the Vision 2030. Would you mind elaborating on that Vision 2030 in terms of where it was then and where it is now?
Yeah. When I think about the Vision 2030 project, which was basically a long-term perspective study of Liberia as a system, I sometimes go back to this idea we've seen come up very often in Liberia of a sovereign national conference. Quite often when we run into problems, I think that happened during the Taylor period. At one point, we heard a whole lot of talk about a sovereign national conference, but it didn't take us very far. And the idea there basically is, after all of these ugly things that had happened, coup, bloodletting, coup plot here, coup plot there, civil war, and so forth and so on, hasn't the time come, it was thought, to pause, to do a national pause, and to reimagine Liberia? I think that's the term that one wants to invoke here. Reimagine Liberia. And when I say reimagine Liberia, it isn't just one or two people or what some may call the Liberian intelligentsia doing it. It is a process that should be based in knowledge. You can't move forward until you are solidly based in knowledge. So do research and find out what Liberia has been and what Liberia is at that point. Okay? But the other part of it, which is very important, is to hold national consultations throughout the country. I recall it was my first opportunity to sit in a vehicle and drive from Foya in Lofa County to Vahon in Lofa County. I had never been on that path before, but here I was because we were engaged in the business of holding national conversations throughout the country. Some of us went in one direction, others went in, but we covered the country as a whole. And the idea here was to consult the people. The businesses go to the people and say to them, here is our idea of what we should be doing with this country. What do you think about it? Tell us your own views about it. Tell us what you think we should do with the Constitution, for example, with the role of women or the absence of the role for women, whatever it is. Just tell us what you think. This is what we want to do with education. Tell us what you think. And we wrote down. We didn't stop there. We came into the diaspora to do the same thing, to consult with the people. And the idea was, after you gather all of this wonderful information based in knowledge, you put it all together and you develop a framework for bringing it to the people in a way that they will take ownership of what you have done. That's the basis upon which we will go forward. I used to have quite a few discussions with Dr. Tubana Tipote about this process of ownership, and he got into some trouble with his friend President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf because he was insisting that this thing is going to die when the regime dies if we don't succeed in ensuring that the people take ownership of it. And we did not succeed, I'm sorry to say, in getting the people to take ownership because the process was not completed. And I make that clear in the book as well. The process was not completed. A lot of wonderful things were begun during the Sirleaf administration, but those wonderful things were not brought to term. And as politics goes, when a new captain comes aboard the ship, that new captain tends to forget about the one before. Countries should build upon the successes of their predecessors. They should. That's the proper way to do it. But it doesn't work that way quite often. And certainly it didn't work that way in this particular case.
So in other words, it died. Vision 2030 died.
Well, where is it today? I mean, where is it today in terms of the things that came out of it? The things that came out of it said that we want to develop a new Liberia where we think differently, we speak differently, we behave differently. It was summarized in a statement that says something like one nation, one people, united for peace and development. I think that was the thing. One nation, one people, united for peace and development. And the idea was in about 30 years, Vision 2030, notice what it's saying, by the time we reach 2030, Liberia would be a middle income, peaceful, democratic, developing country. All those very nice things that you can think about.
Yes, so nicely worded.
Exactly. By 2030, that's where we wanted to be. But the challenge was, were we prepared to bring people on board? We had consulted people. So, I mean, the road was already there to do this, but we didn't complete it. And the question then becomes one of, why didn't we complete it? And why aren't we moving forward with it? And the reason is basically a new regime is on the stage, and the new regime apparently doesn't see fit to take that and move forward with it.
All right. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back here. And this is the Gracious Hope live stream podcast. And our special guest today is Dr. D. Elwood Dun. And he has 2 decades of experience working in both government and the academic arena. And he's a man of faith. And his last work that he did, he was the chair at if I'm not mistaken here. He used to be at Sewanee, it's at Sewanee College, a private college, Episcopal Liberal Arts College in Sewanee, Tennessee. It is popularly known as Sewanee College, and he served there as the chair. Please correct me here, Dr. Dunn. You served there as
Well, at one point, I was chair of the political science department,
yes,
but
yes,
for the most part, I was a professor in political science there.
professor yeah, in political science, and you retired now after how many years? 30
31,
years?
31 years.
Wow.
31 years. That's a
31
long
years.
time. And
Yeah.
this retirement, yes, is worth it because we've been through a lot with both in the academic arena and also politics, or I mean, I say governmental affairs. Okay, now we're talking about change. We all yearn for change in our country, and we see politicians come up every time, new politicians, older politicians, and they all vow to do the best to lead our country progressively and for Liberia to be a better country. As we look around, we see countries like Ghana, Sierra Leone, and other countries that had an independence like late, like in the 60s. And look at our country when it comes to development. We tend to listen to people who want to be leaders. Now, from your own perspective and your insight on the past government that you work for, both the 20th president of the Republic of Liberia, President Tolbert, and the 24th president, uh, Mrs. Johnson Sirleaf. Uh, Now, change is necessary. And you said that your government, the government that you worked for in the past, that is a Talbot regime or administration, let me not use that whole regime, administration, the blueprint was there. It's just that if the pressure groups would have been a little bit patient, things would have panned out after the president leaves office in 1983, constitutionally mandated for him to do so. It would have been possible for Liberia to be a better place. Now, opening up the system caused chaos. Do you think Liberia, as you look at Liberia right now, we all talk about democratic ingredients or democratic values and principles? Do you think Liberia really needs a democratic leader or a mixture of aristocracy or democratic leader? Because if you look at all of our leaders, they have been centralized in power. And the more you open up, things, run amok. So, what do you think from your own understanding? If you look at our political system, what kind of a political system should we have that will at least serve the needs of everyone? Because the ownership you're talking about, it is not happening, and power and decisions are left in the hands of the few.
Yes, and power and decisions are left in the hands of a few because we have a system that has not changed. We have a system that centralizes power rather than decentralizes power. And part of the struggle over these many decades in Liberia has been to decentralize power. I personally am a strong believer in the tenets of democracy. I don't believe that that is right to have a system of governance where the people who are being governed are dictated to by one or a few people. But in the case of the Liberian experience, I think had we done it with, in a gradual manner, and understand that I should step back and say most countries develop democracies in a gradual manner. The United States of America, this country where we are, when they started, the democratic space was not as open as it is today. I assure you, you know that, and
Hmm.
many people listening to me know that. First of all, the number of people who had the right to vote was very small compared to what we have now. You had slavery and all of that that came into the picture. Uh, uh, People had property qualification for voting. All of the European powers, they went through monarchies and all of that, and gradually moved in that direction. I sometimes used to talk a lot with my students about France, particularly, where you've had the revolution, 1789 revolution taking place, put an end to the monarchy. The monarchy is restored. Military dictatorship comes in. The monarchy comes back, and nothing settles in France since that, from that 1789 revolution until we reached 1958 with the establishment of the French Fifth Republic. Then things begin to settle in France. So what I'm trying to say is that when you put a group of people together and you say this is a country, things don't happen overnight. It moves sometimes at snail's pace. I know people are impatient sometimes, but this is the consequence for moving fast as we have moved. And that has brought us to where we are. We have talked about all of the ugly things that have taken place along the way that brought us to where we are. Now, where we are, we can look back and learn lessons from what has happened. And I think one of the lessons we need to learn is that the system that we have in place needs to be fixed. And one way of fixing it is to do serious constitutional review and engage the population, go back to some of the ideas from the Vision 2030 thing. And when I say go back to some of the ideas, that is engage the people in the process. You know, when you do constitutional review nowadays, you don't just put a group of constitutional experts in the room and say, go write a new constitution. You know, after they have done a draft, or even while they are doing the draft, it behooves them to go to the people and engage them before they finalize the draft. And once they have finalized the draft, go back to the people and say, this is our sense of what we are collectively agreeing upon, and let them have their input. Then you finalize it and say to them, well, it looks like this thing is for all of us now, since all of us fashioned it. I think until we are able to put together a governing document, a constitution that decentralizes power, that brings power closer to the people. And, you know, I'm not saying this for the first time. A lot of people have been saying this. There's this man called Wedolier, who is, I think, currently the chairperson of the Governance Commission. He's written a book on the whole idea of decentralization, I'm told. So until we do that, power will remain concentrated. And the nature of power is such that when you concentrate it in the hands of one or a few people, they will exercise it that way. And they will interfere in the other independent branches of the government in subtle ways. I think until we therefore bring that change about, it's going to be very difficult to see the place stabilizing.
And when you look at the Constitution, are you looking at change relating to a presidential term, or what kind of a change would you like to see, or what would you like to see revised in our Constitution?
Well, you know, I had the opportunity to serve as a member of the Constitution Review Committee during the Erling Johnson Sirleaf administration. So we had the opportunity to look at the whole area, all of the areas of the Constitution. Yes, of course, term limit is one of them. Talking about Christianity and politics and so forth and so on. We were at one of the meetings, the committee's meetings, and a group of evangelical Christians showed up and said, "We understand you guys are going to Banga to finalize your work and to come and make a report, but we are coming here to insist that one of the recommendations we want you all to put in the Constitution is that Liberia be declared a Christian country." You probably may have read a little bit about this because it's just a few years ago that this happened. Mm-hmm. So I'm just saying this to say that you open up the process and let people come, but be very careful about how you handle it. And the reason why I say be very careful, because you don't want to start a religious conflict. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Liberia is a country that has African traditional religion, that has Islam, and that has Christianity. So you have to be very careful about what you do with religion in the public square.
Mhm.
Exactly.
And what will you say for those who look at the Constitution, particularly the preamble that declares, God's sovereignty and His grace and His provision for establishing a country or nation state, and also God as the uh, God's providence gives the grace for a country to be established, and that very country's survival is dependent on God. So, what will you say to those people who look at the preamble and say, okay, those are principles that we can see in the Bible, recognizing God, not gods, yet we have a country with diversity of people with different faiths, and we recognize that. However, Christianity leads the way. What will you tell those people?
Well, no, I think that the idea of acknowledging the providence of God is was reflected in both the founding Constitution of 1847, as well as the Suah draft, and as well as what we have now, the 1986 Constitution. And there is nothing in my mind that is controversial about that. There's one thing to say, to recognize uh, uh, God in the development of these documents, or in the development of the state. There's another thing completely different to declare, to make a political declaration that this country is a Christian country. I mean, you hear about some countries that are called the Islamic Republic of Mauritania, or the Islamic Republic of this, or Islamic Republic of that. Uh, that's their choice. We do not carry out our political arrangement that way. We recognize God's presence and providence in all of this, but it's very different from making a political declaration that a country like Liberia is a Christian country.
Mhm. Okay.
Talking about peace and reconciliation in Liberia after the war, we brothers against brothers, sisters against sisters, parents against children, and we kill up ourselves and destroy our country. The Peace and Reconciliation Commission was established, and it had interviews with people publicly and the rest of that. I'm sure you also followed that. What is your take on the outcome of that peace? Work of the Peace and Commission that was set up by the government. What is your take on it? Did you think it achieved something while it was established for?
Well, I think the idea of truth and reconciliation is something that no one can successfully, argue against. It says truth and it says reconciliation. In other words, let's establish the truth first. What happened? We can go and dig up and find out what happened by talking to people, by examining documents, by interviewing people, and so forth and so on. And when we have established the truth about Liberia's past, then we formulate some ways of reconciling us. We are divided. I mean, that is a fact. We are divided along many lines. We have many social cleavages. Sometimes they are ethnic cleavages. Sometimes they are religious cleavages. Sometimes they are other social cleavages. The disparity between those who have and those who have not. They have not. That's a form of cleavage. I mean, we have a situation where a few people up there, not necessarily only politicians, but a few people up there are very wealthy, and the masses of the people are living in grinding poverty. All of those things uh, don't make for a peaceful, prosperous country. So the idea of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission did not originate in Liberia. It came from outside Liberia. Others had tried this in the aftermath of their conflict. The South Africans did a very good job at this in the aftermath of the apartheid system that was in place there. The people in Rwanda tried it in the aftermath of their terrible genocide. So we were trying it. And I think we did a good job of digging into the past, but there's some problems about how we interpret some of this past. But the major problem is that the politicians who were in power when the report came out viewed the report as inimical to their interests. And therefore, they sought to make it inoperative. The major thing that happened was a case was taken to the Supreme Court. And that case basically said that what the Truth and TRC was recommending was unconstitutional because there had been no prior due process of law.
Mm-hmm.
And the Supreme Court is the highest court in our land. So whether it speaks rightly or wrongly, depending on how you want to look at it,
Yeah.
that's the final word. And I think that dealt a crippling blow to the TRC process. So after that, people had to scramble and get the documents, the PRC documents, out of Liberia. Can you imagine? It was like the possibility exists that someone could get their hands on these documents and destroy them. So those documents are in Atlanta, Georgia, as we speak.
Yeah.
Just to secure them for posterity, for the future. Valuable documents. And then, of course, a lot of the things that were recommended in that report, some of them we were trying to implement. The report talked about constitutional review. That's why we're trying constitutional review, but we didn't complete it. The report talked about symbols review, the flag, the seal. That's what we're trying that too, but we didn't complete it. So everything starts and never completes. And that's where we stand.
For those who are not familiar with that case with the Supreme Court, would you mind going just elaborate a little bit for the viewers and the listener to get what that case was about?
Well, I don't remember myself the detail except to say that one person took the case to the Supreme Court and basically said to the Supreme Court, I'm being told, and understand this, I'm being told that the TRC has concluded that my role during the conflict was such that I am precluded from holding public office in Liberia for 30 years. Okay. So I come for some remedy from you, the court. And the court took that particular case. Again, I don't remember the exact the name of the person that took this case, but apparently it ended up being in the interest of all of the people who were put into that particular category. And so the court reviewed what was put before it and came down with the decision that I just mentioned, which then exonerated those people that they didn't have to worry about that. And so the rest of the report, yes, there were some feeble attempts at doing a little thing here and a little thing there by certain parts of it, but there was no passion on the part of the authorities in government for seeing this thing go forward.
Okay, so I know we got a few minutes left here to go. Now, looking at our entire country, Liberia, and from your era of maturity and getting to work in the government, and later on leaving the country to work on a foreign soil, and then going back to work for the Johnson administration, and working on some documents that are pertinent to the growth of our country and looking at progression for the future. Now, overall, if you look at Liberia and you look at the church, that is the ecclesiastical establishment of the country, the church that they established there, well respected. In fact, our constitution, the first one was signed, declaration was signed at the Providence Baptist Church, from my understanding of history. Looking at the church now, do you see the church as being weak and not efficient and effective to instill some of the principles and values that should be uh, within the culture that we have right now, particularly among the young generation? And also, how do you see Liberia from now, looking at our leaders who have both participated and some that are currently participating and the future? What would be your perspective on those things?
Well, let's talk a little bit about the church. I have had the opportunity in my life to do some serious research on the history of the Episcopal Church of Liberia. I did a book that was published in 1992 that is simply a history of the Episcopal Church in Liberia, 1821 to 1980. And I use archival research. The church has an archive in Austin, Texas, and I use that as my primary source. So I come from there, and then I took a sort of glance at the other denominations in Liberia. My old college professor, Dr. Walter Kaysen, did a doctoral dissertation at Columbia University years ago that is titled something like The Growth of Christianity in the Liberian Environment, where he looked at all of the mainline denominations in Liberia, not only the Episcopal Church, but the Baptist, the Methodist, the Presbyterian, and so forth and so on. So that's background for me. And what I saw was a church that pioneered modern education in Liberia. One has to make that point very clear. That is, the government was not in a position to finance education in Liberia. And the churches undertook that responsibility to educate the small citizenry at the time. And over time, the church has been involved, continuously involved in education because it's been part of its ministry of evangelism. In other words, in order to teach the Bible, we have to deal with language issues, and we have to deal with educational issues and so forth and so on. So those things have always been together, education and evangelism and so forth and so on. And then out of that came principled people who some of them occupied important positions in the government. So the hope was that they would bring the Christian values to their jobs. And of course, those Christian values were being taught in the schools that I was just mentioning to you as well. And we've had perhaps all presidents of Liberia have been professed Christians so far, every single one so far. But the question then becomes one of how are those values transmitted to the present generation? What has happened to that in the decade of the 70s? What happened to that in 1979? What happened to that with the coup? What happened to that in that decade of the 80s and going forward? And I think a short way of answering that is to say that those unsettling situations, the 70s, the 80s, and going forward, those unsettling situations led to a fraying of the moral fabric of society. So that the kind of country that I grew up in when I was 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 years old is very different from the type of country that people of my age are growing up in. I came from a Christian home and I went to a Christian school. And the values that came out of that experience went with me as I moved along. I was lucky, I must say, in my life, and stayed with me. And I'm going to take it with me to the grave. Mm-hmm. But the young people like me today do not have that. Many of them are not raised in homes. Many of them are raising themselves. What do you expect under those circumstances? Yes, the churches are still there, but it's changing also. Once upon a time, we were talking about mainline denominations. Even in the 70s, we're still the mainline denominations were still in the forefront, but they have been challenged by a significant number of people on the more Pentecostal evangelical side. They are moving to the top. So there is something called the Liberian Council of Churches, and I sometimes wonder whether there are more council of churches than we had in the past. So you have one that started in 1982, but I'm told that there are many others
Mm-hmm.
from the many others. You have a whole lot that seem to have emerged at the present time. So it's hard to therefore say, for me at least, on the basis of my limited knowledge and experience, to say whether the church is there as an institution, as the voice of God, uh, saying, "Thus said the Lord" to society. There are individuals who play this role. I think my bishop, the new bishop of the Episcopal Church of Liberia, Bishop Silly, I have heard him preach on many occasions since just for this brief period that he's been bishop. And I think he does that very well. Someone like the late Michael Francis did that very well. And I mean, we can name a few here and there. I think former Methodist Bishop Arthur Kula does this very well. I'm just thinking about names and throwing them out. And we need more. Reverend Reeves at the Providence Baptist Church, who is the current president of the Liberia Council of Churches. I think he does that very well. And I'm sorry if I'm calling names. You have to be careful when you start calling names, because you
I know.
sort of leave out some. So I'm just remembering some and saying it. But we need more of that. And we need to do two things. The two things I think we need to do is to pay some attention to the family unit, and what we do in that unit. That's the nucleus for all societies. What we do in that unit, and bring the children there, and not let the children raise themselves. So we need to pay attention to that. And the second thing we need to do is to find a way to bring the teaching of civics to our schools. That's something that is going to bind us together as one people, that we have a common understanding of our past and a common sense of our destiny, common sense of where we are going. Once we have understood that past and understood it well, it's a challenge in both cases.
It is a challenge, and we are so glad to speak with you today. And if you haven't gotten his memoir, we ask that you, let me put on the screen here, A Liberian Life, memoir of an academic and former Minister of State for Presidential Affairs, Dr. D. Elwood Dun. He has been explaining 2 decades of experience in government, academia, and his faith. He is strong in his faith, and we all hope that as we read his book, we'll get to know more about him and what he has been doing, his contributions over the years in our homeland, Liberia. And so it is a way to show our patriotism and nationalism, understanding of where we are. Like he was talking about the education of bringing about the education of bringing about civics lessons in the classrooms and things that bind us together culturally and socially and politically. And so we are so privileged to have him here today, and we'd like to say thank you so much. And now, just before you leave, Dr. Dunn, I have a picture here. I see you here smiling here with your late wife and your children.
Yes, two of my
Daughter.
children. Two of my children. I have 4 of them. These are 2 of them: Jermaine, my younger daughter, and Siddha, my younger son.
Where are they now?
They are here in the Maryland area. They're adults now, and in their professions, doing their thing, so to speak. Yeah.
And any of them teacher?
No, Jermaine went to law school, and Siddha is in the finance business. Yes.
Okay.
No, not. Yes, I take that back. My older daughter followed me in the profession. She did a PhD in international relations.
Oh,
So
okay.
she has been teaching, yes.
Yeah, and it was good to know that your mother and your aunt were teachers.
Indeed, they were.
They were.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, at
That's a
different
long
times.
history. Thank you so
Yeah,
much, Dr.
thank
Dunn.
you.
We appreciate your presence here today.
Thank
Until
you.
then, we shall see you again.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed this exchange. Thank you, and good luck to you in your work.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Right. All right, Reverend Deddeh. That was a whole lot we learned looking at um, uh, years back, the experience of our country, his experience, his insights, and looking at the future of our country.
Yes, certainly that there were some questions we hope we would have discussed today. The good governance, because he worked with the good governance. I hope we can invite him back on the program to part two. We call it part two to going to
Too.
the other years or going to the other areas because he has a wealth of experience that we can still tap into. People would like to know the impact of the good governance on the Liberian political system since it was established by the Ellen government and then led by Dr. Sawyer, and he was there as well. People would like to know. Again, we wanted I wanted to hear from him about the power being taken out of the school because the
Mhm.
impact of that, but we didn't have the chance to do that. So hopefully in the future when he comes back, we can discuss those things. I believe he has something to say about the Bible, especially. You and I talked about this so many times on our program.
Mhm.
And the Bible is taken out of the school. We learned Bible in school. You and I, we learned Bible in school. It was during our formative years, which positively impacted us as well. And the Bible is not in school anymore. We would love to hear his take on that. And
And
other,
many other issues. Yeah.
yeah, many other
But
issues.
there's a whole lot we learned today. But
Yeah,
anyway,
exactly,
yeah,
exactly.
it was a pleasure. We'd like to say thank you so much, our viewers, for watching our podcast today. And we'll be back here next Saturday, the same time, 3 p.m. Central Time, 4 p.m. That is 3 p.m. Central Time, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific Time. And in Liberia, or all of you who have the GMT time zone, it is at 8 p.m. GMT. Thank you so much. And again, we'll be here next Saturday. And we'd like to say bye bye for now.